have a couple of apologies already received from Phil Flanagan and Danny Kinahan. And Gordon, you have a funeral to go to as well later on at 11 o'clock, haven't you? Or, so.
No, there's changes there, Chairman.
All right.
Changed slightly, yeah.
All right, that's okay.
Thank you.
So you're still going to be with us, aye?
Hopefully for a while.
That's okay.
Chairman, I'm on bench duty,
Yes,
so I
you
can't
explained that
have
to
to
me.
leave. Yeah.
Aye. That's grand. So no further apologies received then. No. We move to the draft minutes. That's of our last meeting, the 13th of January, page 5 onwards. So if members are content with the detail and accuracy of those minutes. Read.
Great.
Yeah. And also table today is under chairperson's business. That's item number 3. Is an article by a newsletter in regard to the rural road fuel rebate scheme. Now, it was drawn to my attention, and the newsletter rang up for comment as well. So, what I was trying to establish here, if we could write to the appropriate authorities in it's probably Westminster based, or some of the department, to establish what criteria were used, and if Northern Ireland or any part of Northern Ireland was assessed under that criteria. I know we've dwelt quite a bit, probably before Martin, you and William's time, but quite a bit here on fuel issues and the levels of fuel charge. So if members are happy enough that we do that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Chair, what we send it to the minutes?
The criteria used and whether under that criteria any part of Northern Ireland was assessed for eligibility.
What are we writing to the minister? See what the minister's doing to influence it, or?
Right, we can, yes.
Yeah.
And maybe forward it on the DART committee as well for information.
Aye, we could. We're happy enough with that. Members agree with that
Great,
course of
yeah.
action, aye. Okay. Now, just to inform members that officials have advised that they need to defer the storage of carbon dioxide access to infrastructure regulations Northern Ireland 2015 draft consultation document from the 3rd to the 17th of February. Okay. Now, next item then is agenda item number 4, which is the oral briefing from the Assembly Research. Now, maybe just, if we could, in case we're short on members later on, if members are happy enough, I mentioned earlier the need to do that. That's we could take the committee inquiry into economic growth and job creation now, and then we'll come to yourself, and it'll not take us too long to work our way through this anyway. This is the terms of reference and the stuff that Jim has put work into as well. So the papers for this are from pages 81 to 96, just to get this signed off on so that we can get cracking. I don't want to be in a situation later on maybe with 4 members and can't make decisions, you know. This is an important one. So, okay, so there's what we have from 81 to 96 is the draft inquiry proposal, including the terms of reference, the draft request for evidence letter, the draft public notice on committee website page, and the draft inquiry timeline. So, okay. And we also have an email from the Institute of Civil Engineers in Northern Ireland regarding the launch of the 2015 Engineering UK State of Engineering report, which probably they may wish to feed into our inquiry as well, which would have implications. But also what we have tabled today is a draft survey proposal for the inquiry, which you've just gone through and signed off on with a few suitable amendments. So we can see there the details of this. Are members happy enough? I'm sure you've had a chance to look through this. It's based on the broad thrust of what our discussion was last week. So if members are happy enough there with the terms of reference on the focus of the inquiry. Okay.
Chairman, on page 83.9, the committee will call for evidence. Initially, will not be...
Where are you at, Gordon? Which page?
83.
83, okay.
9. The committee will call for evidence. Does that mean we'll initially ask for written evidence? Is that what the plan is, Jim?
Well,
then they'll come and talk to us, or
both.
we intend to write out to those organisations and ask them to come to the committee.
Well, that's for us to decide what we want to do, you know.
Based on written evidence that comes back.
Yeah, so initially we'll be asking for written submissions.
Yes, and then sift through them and see who we want to call further. I think
Right.
that'd be the best way to go, you know.
Yeah.
Well, there'll be a lot of people interested in this, there's no doubt about it. So, okay, so members happy enough with
The large manufacturers and so on, they'll be...
manufacturing and aye, they're mentioned there somewhere. Aye, there they are, it's in alphabetical order. Aye.
What about the like of Bombardier and so on? Where would they fit in?
They're part of that manufacturing NI
Are they?
consortium, aye.
Yeah.
I'm sure the survey would be issued to
To everybody.
many businesses as
Like you
possible.
can send it out to constituents and the like too, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The survey, we can all do it.
Right.
Send it out to
Public now.
businesses within our constituencies and the likes, so.
We can do that.
Oh, aye. There's no reason why not.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Just looking
And we're encouraging other stakeholders to do that too, so among their membership base, the wider it goes, the better.
to 6.
Okay, so members happy enough with that?
Looks good.
And again, thanks to Jim for his work in preparing all this. That makes a good impression that we have the likes of something well thought through going out to people too, you know, professionally.
Chair,
Very
I
good.
apologise for being late, and I just caught up in the end, so if I'm saying anything out of turn that's not consistent with the conversation, stop me, of course, but you just mentioned Bombardier there, and specifically around, they've got huge supply contracts, but they import from all across the world at a hugely expense to themselves, and they need companies to start setting up here to provide those
Yes.
things locally. And I think it's worthwhile separately talking to them about some of that.
Well, that-
And I know that's drilled down into the specifics, and you're talking about the
Yes.
terms of reference, but it's a
Well, that'll be sort of what I was sort of saying there. To Gordon was asking specifically about them, and what we were saying was, before you come in, Fergal, what we were doing was we're signing off on the terms of reference and also the survey, which you've probably seen as well. So what we're encouraging people to do, stakeholders and indeed ourselves, MLAs, to distribute that survey right round and to encourage participation.
Yes.
And if they want to make a submission, grand, you know. I'm sure members will invite them because it's going to be a public, the notification is going to go out public
Yep.
about the inquiry, and if people make submissions, we'll sift through them, and the committee will look at all the submissions as they come in, sift through them, and determine then, are there others we want to take further public evidence from? That's sort of, aye, that's the way we're going to deal with it, so thank you. Okay, members, then, we're agreed with that approach.
An agreement on all various bits and pieces.
And what I have to do is just go through this for the formalities. If members are content with the draft inquiry proposal, which, yes, I presume we're...
Great.
yes.
Yeah, great.
If we're content to issue the request for evidence to the stakeholders identified,
Great, yeah.
content to issue the public notice in the main newspapers and the committee website, agreed. Content with the draft inquiry timeline, agreed.
Agreed.
If content to note the email from the Institution of Civil Engineers in Northern Ireland in evidence for the inquiry, agreed.
Agreed.
Content for myself to arrange a meeting with Alistair Hamilton, CEO of Invest NI, to discuss the inquiry and what the committee would like to get out of it, including the approach to surveying businesses, because I'm sure they could participate in that too. Agreed.
Great, good idea.
If members are content with the proposed business survey, well, we've already gone over that in a wee bit of detail earlier there, so I presume it's yes. Agreed.
Great.
And content for the committee office to liaise with Assembly Research to issue the survey on Survey Monkey. Agreed?
Yep. Just a word of caution on Survey Monkey. Having done one myself, it may have been my own incompetence, but when I sent out the link, a lot of the people immediately got a completed, straight to the end completed form. I don't know why that happened, but I'm sure Aidan knows what he's doing.
Somebody making a whole lot of presumptions.
Probably where I didn't, but just a word of caution. Test it, I suppose, around maybe members or
Right.
your own people.
So we'll liaise with Assembly Research, hopefully the experts in that field, to make sure that we don't have any presumed outcomes.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Right, and just again to emphasise, the survey can be issued through business representative organisations, Twitter, local councils and committee members. So just if people, once it's put up through the Twitter account and the Assembly website and all that, just if people could just get active and retweeting it and doing what we can to encourage full participation, please. Okay?
Chairman, just one basic
Gordon.
question. Are there any other departments doing the same thing?
Any other committees?
Yeah, committees or departments doing the same thing within the Assembly? Any clash that you're aware of?
No. Don't think so, Jim. Have you heard of anything?
I suppose, is it worth us sharing the survey with particularly the Dell committee?
The terms of reference are routinely shared with other committees, so if members are content.
Finance
We'll do
committee?
that.
Yeah.
Aye, we can make sure that they're shared through the committee so that they all know what's happening.
Yes.
Because they'll have a pretty important input too.
Yeah.
If it's all about a joined-up approach to this, we need to make sure that there is.
Not joined up.
Aye. Go from the very start.
So we're leading really as a,
Good idea.
That's it.
as a Premier Committee, is that the idea, Chair?
I like that word, Gordon. Good.
We're used to that in North Down, the Premier Borough, you see.
Or district, as it may stay.
The committees.
Ah, yes, it's on. Yes,
Reconfirm.
it's on the list of stakeholders here, Gordon. So, okay, thanks for that. So that's an important
Your
bit
meetings.
to get started off with there and attended to. So thank you. Right, we'll move back then to yourself or to yourselves, Aidan, on the foreign direct investment agenda item number 4. Then the oral briefing. So we have the Assembly research paper, the FDI determinants in European regions at page 14. A review of literature regarding the determinants of foreign direct investment, page 49. And briefing the committee today are Mr. Aidan Stennett, Research Officer from RIAS. Aidan has been with us before, but particularly welcome is Daniel Donnelly, who's a bursary student at RIAS. You're very welcome too, Daniel, and thanks very much for the work that you've done. Over to yourselves then, Aidan, to make a presentation and to take us through it. Read through it last night. Some very interesting stuff in this, you know, about the approach from other countries and other regions as well. So please continue, Aidan, then.
Thanks, Chair. As you say, there's 2 papers that we're going to take you through today. Daniel will take you through, if we may start on the one that's second in your packs on page 49, the literature on FDI determinants, just because they flow from one to the other. And then I'll take you through the second paper that looks at the FDI propositions in a number of European regions. So I'll pass over to Daniel.
Thanks, Aidan. Thank you, Chair, for your warm welcome. This briefing paper reviewed the literature on the determinants of foreign direct investment with the aim of identifying factors that firms consider in their location decision. A variety of sources were consulted, including academic, business and government publications, as well as resources issued by international organisations such as the IMF and OECD. The paper began by defining the FDI as an incentive from an investment from one country into another that involves establishing operations or acquiring tangible assets, including stakes in other businesses. The economic rationale that underpinned firms' motivation to engage in the FDI was outlined, namely to seek higher or longer-term profits in exploiting advantages which could not be gained by expansion in their country of origin. The motivating factors behind the FDI were identified as highly diverse and shown to differ depending on what sector of the economy the investment was located. Primary, secondary and tertiary sector FDI are shown to react differently to several economic variables. For example, a weaker exchange rate proved a positive determinant for FDI in manufacturing, while a stronger exchange rate proved a positive determinant for FDI in services. Furthermore, the paper highlighted differences in the significance of factors in advanced and developing economies, illustrating the factors which are positive for FDI in an advanced economy may actually reduce FDI in a developing economy, or vice versa. For example, labour market flexibility proved to be a positive determinant of FDI in developing economies, but does not carry the same importance in advanced economies. The role of tax and incentives proved to be complex, with their importance showing great degrees of variability dependent upon the sources consulted. Non-tax factors such as general economic conditions and political stability were typically viewed as more important. However, when such non-tax factors were judged to be roughly equal, tax and incentives were more likely to serve as motivating factors in decision-making and could potentially play a tiebreaker role between possible locations. The existence of economic clusters was also identified as an important factor for FDI. This is because when a region becomes a centre of expertise in a particular industry, it therefore becomes an attractive location for foreign investment. It was also found that a region benefits most when FDI enters into a pre-existing cluster, as local firms within the cluster are more likely to benefit from positive spillovers such as knowledge transfer and sharing of best practice. Market size proved also to be a determinant which investors take into consideration when deciding on a location to invest. Factors such as domestic market growth potential and proximity to market score highly in global surveys carried out by FDI experts, FDI Intelligence. Northern Ireland's position within the UK and the UK's membership of the EU, the world's largest trading bloc, was noted as an advantage that gives investors in Northern Ireland the ability to trade freely with the rest of Europe. The paper also briefly enters into the discussion of the variations that exist between motivations for FDI generally and specifically in Northern Ireland. In a Northern Ireland specific study, assessing motivations for FDI skilled workforce, assessing motivations for FDI skilled workforce availability proved the most important factor. This contrasts with the global study, where factors related to access to markets were revealed to be the most highly cited motives. Northern Ireland's performance on the factors identified within the paper will be assessed further in further research. Overall, FDI is shown to be highly diverse and difficult to characterise. It can be attracted to different factors in economies depending on the particular needs of the firm. Multinational firms are not identical, and therefore the characteristics of economies which they seek can differ greatly. Table 2 at the end of the paper summarises the factors identified throughout. Column 1 illustrates generic factors, such as market size. Column 2 shows factors which are particularly attractive to certain sectors, such as well-developed infrastructure for services. Column 3 reflects other desirables, which can potentially act as tiebreakers when other factors are roughly equal, such as government incentives.
Okay. So, second paper, which is on page 14, looked at a number of European regions to show how the determinants Daniel identified are really used in practice. So, each case study we've chosen ranked highly in the FDI Intelligence European Cities and Regions of the Future report, 2014-2015. So that left us with Nordrhein-Westfalen in Germany, Scotland, Greater Stockholm, the Amsterdam region, Copenhagen capital region, and the Greater Zurich area. There's a lot of information in the paper, so I'm not going to each case study individually, but just draw your attention to some of the conclusions that we drew, which was really about identifying areas of commonality amongst the 6 regions and sort of lessons to be learned. So the following conclusions were found. Each region is part of a strong national economy, and there are also significant elements of that economy. The regions looked at include capital city regions, a devolved state, and a federal state. Tax rates are often a selling point within FDI propositions, but it's not always the base rate of corporation tax. The regions tend to offer tax incentives to businesses. Most commonly amongst these is a tax rebate on R&D related activity. Personal taxes also highlighted by the regions. For example, both Copenhagen and Amsterdam offer a special rate of tax for expat employees, which may act as a draw factor for foreign talent. The business climate and support structure for businesses is also significant. Scotland and Nordrhein-Westfalen show the important role of a strong investment promotion agency and how that can encourage FDI. Connectivity is also important. Many of the regions placed a strong emphasis on their traditional rail, road and port infrastructure, and digital infrastructure is significant too. Greater Amsterdam was a good example of both these. The region's home to a data hub, and that's a key draw in encouraging data centres to set up there. A third of all data centres in Europe are based there. But it's also got a strong traditional infrastructure, so its ports and its airport are a strong draw for logistics companies. The next factor we saw was the access to the wider European market is generally seen as a selling point. This is even true of Switzerland, which, although it's not a member of the EU, facilitates market access to the EU states through bilateral agreements. All of the regions are home to high-performing and often internationally recognised industry sectors and clusters. This is seen in Zurich's financial sector, Copenhagen's clean tech sector, and Sweden's automotive industry, for example. Furthermore, the regions examined often demonstrate a high concentration of already existing FDI. Historic industrial development and location advantages were also common factors. These take the form of such things as the industrial brand in Nordrhein-Westfalen, the Swiss-made brand, Amsterdam's port infrastructures, and Scotland's oil and gas industry. Workforce talent and research intensity are again common selling points. The regions examined often have a high proportion of university graduates. Moreover, the workforce is often promoted as being bilingual or multilingual, and often multicultural as well. The regions are strong in R&D and innovation performance. They tend to be home to R&D intensive industries, such as the clean tech and high tech sectors and creative industries. They're also home to universities and private research institutions. And then finally, quality of life is a significant part of the package on offer. This is seen especially in the case of Copenhagen and Amsterdam. They both performed well in the European Commission's Quality of Life Survey 2013. They were first and second in the overall measure. So overall, I think it's important to note that whilst all these individual factors come into play, it's the overall package of selling points rather than one single point that is making the FDI proposition in the regions examined. So.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Aidan. Obviously, this is very relevant that this is coming through now, particularly as we're moving into a full-blown inquiry where a lot of these themes will be taken very much a read across, and I'm sure will be repeated on numerous of occasions by the people who are coming in. I was reading last night about the performance of the creative industries in Scotland, and that really surprised me that there were so many people, 65,200 people of all people employed in Scotland are in the creative industries. That's pretty big. Mm-hmm. And it seems they've done quite a bit of work there in expanding that. Do you want to just? I'm looking here further. In Scotland too, the incentives. There was one measure here that was referred to the tax relief available for creative industries, and tax incentives are available in other areas for innovation and entrepreneurship in Scotland. Presumably, that's just not confined to Scotland, because you would have to have, as we found with the debate on corporation tax and that there would need to be almost the same, if you like, tax breaks or incentivisation available here too.
I'll answer that because I actually written the Scotland case study. Yeah, those are tax incentives provided by HMRC, which Scotland put front and centre on their Invest Scotland website, and try and sort of build on the sort of strong the strength of the creative industry.
But they're available here
in Scotland. Too? Yep, the UK-wide HMRC tax.
So they're not just exclusive to Scotland. I would be surprised if they had been. That's grand. Thank you for that, Daniel. The other thing, going right through all this, and you touched on it yourself there as well, is the clusters. Not just clusters of specialisms, but clusters of specialisms which work successfully in close proximity to the R&D places, the good universities. and that seems to be a theme which is running right throughout your research paper. Do you want to expand a bit further on that?
It's these are these countries come up, you know, in an FDI performance, and they've come up when we've looked as a committee. We've looked at R&D performance previously, so they're companies or countries with strong performance overall economically, but they've gone down that R&D route as well, and the innovation route, and that's acting as a draw for businesses who are in that area.
I suppose it shouldn't be a surprise that that would be the case either, you know. It's kind of glaring at us. That's our challenge, of course, as well, too, to coordinate all that. That's why we emphasise so much on the Horizon 2020 stuff. So, any other member want to come in on either of the two papers? Margie?
Yes, Patsy Carmichael. Gentlemen, thank you. Two great papers. But help me just with, I take it the most successful sovereign state in Europe in terms of inward investment is the south of Ireland, our friends across the border. You didn't look at sovereign states, obviously.
No, we
Scotland wasn't independent in Irish research.
No, I think it might be a tie-up between Scotland and the UK, or not Scotland. I think the UK is actually quite a high performer as well.
Okay.
But Ireland does perform well, and regions
So
within.
I suppose my question was, because it's a very comprehensive review of regions, but what's happening closer to home is obviously of particular interest, but we didn't get a chance to look at that at all. Why PayPal would go to Dundalk or whatever, we haven't had a chance to look at that at all in these two studies, no?
No, we really based it on the overall ranking here, and if we look at that, we focused on the top 10 European regions overall as our starting point.
I suppose my
From that, but of course it's something that can be done.
yeah, I just think, Church, this is very, very useful, but it's probably relevant to us, the reasons why, in particular, our friends across the board have done so magnificently well, especially in terms of US foreign direct investment. Maybe work for another day. Can I ask one more question? In terms of your conclusions here, you talk about quality of life. Quality of life is a selling point for a number of regions. That's been in the news this week. Our young friend, the outspoken Barry, Emma Bricknell have made in Belfast, have been making some points about that, and I certainly don't agree with them all, but brings up this point about why do entrepreneurs come to areas, why do people make investments, why does Chicago Mercantile Exchange come here rather than going to Warsaw, why does Liberty come here, and so on and so forth. When you talk about quality of life, where is tolerance in that? Where is diversity in that? And is that part of what you see as quality of life? Are you talking really about we need good parks and good walkways, or is it both those things?
It's quite broad. Look, for example, one of the measures that we've used is the European Commission's Quality of Life City Survey, and that measures things such as satisfaction with healthcare services, satisfaction with cultural facilities, satisfaction of the state of the streets, public places, presence of foreign nationals, safety, trust, and the efficiency of public services. That's only areas that Copenhagen scored well in. That's the example, but it's a very broad measure. It's a totality of life.
Okay, you're right, Ditch. Oh, Fergal?
Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much indeed. And it's very comprehensive, two sets of work. I'm interested in what's the decision making behind some of the stuff. I mean, how did Scotland arrive at the film industry and life sciences? How come Zurich has 460 companies that are in life sciences? So, as well as FDI, so we look at what the decision making processes around highlighting specific areas to focus on.
Yes, I think that may be another piece of work if you wanted to go into that detail, because we're having to take a step back.
Yeah.
But it's something we could look at.
I mean, particularly, I'm conscious of the David Wall contribution that we had just before Christmas around life sciences and cancer centre, etc. and then we learn that Zurich is 460 companies. I mean, we in danger of missing the boat. You know, we saw ourselves the San Diego experience and the amount of companies that were created there over a relatively short period of time. And so should we be doing something different? I mean, maybe this is part of the bigger question of Barry. So,
I think
but it might be just something that if you had some time, and I can't, I can only suggest, but how do regions of countries arrive at that? And whatever, how they've arrived at it, and it's worked in some places.
I think part of it's historic and historic going back quite a long time. If we take the example of Amsterdam, it's got a quite a large logistic industry, and that's based on its ports infrastructure and its position. So there are already existing
Scotland
advantages.
wouldn't have had a life sciences focus, for example, or even a film industry.
No, but there is something else there.
Yeah, there's another thing that I think we need to catch. It's about identifying the wave and catching it. But how is that done?
It'll be the totality of strategy, and there may be a degree of chance as well. You know, businesses are created organically, and then
Yes, but there's a chance. This is not for you, but there's a chance you miss the wave. You know, and I think we need to drill down into some of the decision making of how you would identify, particularly, for example, in terms of the universities and the hospital, the size of our population, etc. You know what I'm driving at in terms of the health sciences and things like that. Just be conscious that we don't want to miss anything. But I think this is great in terms of opening up a discussion. And like all of these things, once you grab one bit of the conversation, it points you to another. And maybe we not limit our research to this, but let's see where it takes us. You know, without getting into a completely open-ended conversation about what Nirvana would look like. You know, it's.
Okay, thanks, Fergal. I've just seen yourself, Stephen, there first, and then we'll. Sounds like we're going to have to put things on hold for a minute or two. So.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.
Stephen, and you're up.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Thank you guys for the briefing. No, I just want to ask yourself, Daniel, you made reference to labour flexibilities being less of a factor in developed countries. How were labour flexibilities defined?
Labour market flexibility in the paper which I drew the information from was based as a qualitative measure of labour flexibility, i.e. hiring and firing costs, so how easy it is or what costs incur on firms to hire and fire in various different economies.
And maybe sounds like an obvious question, but in terms of within the context of this research in a global sense, Northern Ireland would be considered a developed economy?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It would be a weaker region within a developed economy.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Just a very brief question. Very, very good papers. Absolutely fantastic. You get through the whole thing: logistics, creative industries, life sciences. What I'm not saying is, well, I suppose you have infrastructure, but specifically on their national grids with regards to electricity, was there comparisons looked at there compared to the attractiveness of that, the cost of energy and the burden on companies?
Thinking back to what we've read for this, I honestly can't remember it coming up. Possibly vaguely coming up in one sense, but I think one of the surveys that has been used throughout the paper includes energy costs. I think it's possibly the World Economic Forum's competitiveness includes energy as a measure, but it wasn't a measure that we've compared across regions, because none of the regions we've looked at are making a selling point of their energy costs or their energy infrastructure.
So it's on it's within the competitiveness structure, right? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, just members, unless anybody else has anything further to add, if, given its helpfulness and usefulness, particularly in laying some of the parameters for the inquiry, are members content enough to include the research papers in evidence for the growth in jobs inquiry?
Yes.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay. Then the oral briefing on access to banking.
Chair, just before we move on, just coming out of the briefing, one thing that was brought up in the briefing was healthcare. I was just thinking it wasn't included. I know we've kind of already discussed the survey, but I'm right in thinking, Jim, that wasn't included in the survey as one of the questions of the importance of healthcare.
It would be part of that life standard of living.
Yeah, it's maybe part of the catch-up. No, that's fine.
Okay, next item then is agenda item number 5, the oral briefing on access to banking. Okay, Aidan, do you want to give us a brief overview there, and then we can, obviously a very topical issue insofar as banks have been closed, but thank you for it. Do you want to give us an overview there, and then we'll take a few questions from members?
Yes, no problem, Chair. I'll
That's included, sorry, we can just say to members, include page 60.
So the paper looks at alternative ways customers can access banking services in Northern Ireland. That's alternative to going through the traditional banking branch. So there was 4 methods looked at in the paper, and there are various stages of development. First of all, it's the post offices. There's agreements between the post office and various banks to enable post offices branches to offer a range of services. The services offered include cash withdrawals, balance inquiries, cash deposits and cheque deposits. What all banks don't, not all banks don't necessarily offer these 4 services through the post offices. What they do offer depends on the agreement between the specific bank and the post office and the type of account that it's associated with. So there's variation between what's offered in business accounts, personal customers, and basic bank accounts. But the 3 tables on the paper, that's tables 1, 2 and 3, outline the services offered by the range of banks to customers through the post offices. And that's as of the 5th of January 2015. Northern Ireland currently has 480 post office branches in operation, and the banking services offered in the tables will be available in all post offices irrespective of the location. So services that, say, Bank of Ireland or Ulster Bank offer in one branch will be the same across the 480. We mapped the post office branches at figure 1. You'll see that they're mapped as either red or green. Those marked in red are open fewer than 40 hours per week, so it's roughly 9 to 5 opening. And those marked in green are open in excess of 40 hours per week. There's quite a bit of range between the opening hours of the banks. For example, some are open 1.5 hours per week. That's the Ballyword mobile service in Castlewellan. Whereas the other extreme is 125.8 hours per week. That's in Marlborough Park in Belfast. And then figure 2 provides a heat map of the Northern Ireland population, giving an indication of sort of the numbers of people served by branches as mapped in figure 1. The second area we looked at was credit unions. As the committee will be aware from its work in this area, credit unions have, both the Irish League of Credit Unions and the Ulster Federation of Credit Unions have expressed their desire to expand into the area of banking services. However, Newry Credit Union remains the only credit union currently offering a bank account to members. The latest news following the committee's motion on credit union services from February of last year is that DSD officials had reached broad agreement with both the Irish League of Credit Unions and the Ulster Federation of Credit Unions on a number of pilots with small and large credit unions so as to improve access to services for people living on low incomes and to look at how credit unions can contribute to financial inclusion for such claimants. Work is ongoing to agree proposals for the modernisation of credit unions through 2 pilot projects. First is modernising credit union operations, and the second is modernising credit union services, which includes enhanced banking services and products. The next area was the mobile bank on wheels, which is a service being trialled by Ulster Bank, and it's been providing access to customers in the Corrieduff and Sainfield areas so far. It's a mobile vehicle that contains a branch inside and associated services. During the pilot scheme, the mobile service has been available once a week for a period of 3 to 4 hours. The bank has plans to roll this service out further, particularly in line with where closures have been, but they've said that this will be dependent on the outcome of due diligence and security checks. And then the final area we looked at briefly was the internet and mobile banking services, which are often mentioned when banks announce branch closures, and the final section of the paper includes quotes from the banks to that effect. Ofcom have figures in their latest communication market report for Northern Ireland's use of internet. Broadband access is 73%, or was at 73% in 2014, at 73% in urban areas, actually 75% in rural areas, and 51% of consumers access the internet on their mobile phones. Smart-enabled internet devices, 55% of the Northern Ireland population uses a smartphone, and about 45% of the population have access to a tablet device. The same report found that 51% of Northern Ireland internet users use the internet for banking purposes. In total, however, that divides down a bit further, with 39% of internet users having used the internet for online banking in the past week when surveyed, while 12% of internet users said they did so less often. No figures for Northern Ireland's use of telephone banking could be located. However, research from the UK suggests that 17% of UK bank customers use telephone banking at least once a month, while 54% of it said they used it at least once in a year. Those are from 2013, those figures. So that's really all that's in the paper, and I'm happy to go on questions if you have.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Aidan, and for the research they put in. Is there any more word about, particularly in the credit unions, there was to be a pilot project carried out, or sorry, 2 pilot projects I see there. Agreed to progress 2 pilot projects with each pilot likely to involve 3 credit unions. Is there any more contemporary up-to-date as to if they've started?
That's the last statement. I could locate on them, and they're both from October of last year. It's been taken forward by DSD, so maybe it might be worth contacting them to.
I think if we could, please, if members are happy enough, that we could get an update via the Social Development Committee on progress on those pilot projects and where they're likely to be and what they're likely to do. I think that would be very helpful indeed. Any other members? Yes, we have Gordon. Yes.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much, Aidan, for your presentation. I noticed there you mentioned of a number of banks have reached agreement to enable the Post Office to provide personal banking services over the counter. I think certainly from my experience, the banks in many ways make an assumption that the post offices have the resources to deal with the new customers. We certainly had an experience in North Down where they closed the Danske Bank in Hollywood, and I got a phone call to say the bank was closed within 8 weeks or something like that. There was no consultation. I think that's one big thing. I know you're not here to listen to all our woes, but there was no consultation at all with the community. We're based in Hollywood. There was no consultation, just told they were closing it. We put up a bit of a fight, I suppose, and one of the things that when they came to talk to us, they said that we go to the post office, and we said, well, our post office is extremely busy, and people have to queue up. Have you had any discussions? Have you found out, are there resources in place to deal with these accidents? And I hadn't. And even today, I don't believe, they never came back to me actually on it, but I don't believe that they went out of their way to make sure there were resources in place, because people had to obviously go somewhere. And then they moved all the accounts into Belfast,
Yes.
into the centre of Belfast, which, the local thing had gone, and there is a real issue here about how the public are being treated, and how elected representatives are being treated, and how banks, I think, are taking this for granted. People have been with them for 30-odd years. We're extremely angry about the way the whole business was managed, but I think that point is important. That I think we all recognise post office do have a role now, but in a lot of cases they don't have the resources.
Anything further to add?
Well, just to reiterate, if you look at the figure 1, that shows some of the variation in the services. It doesn't go into details in it, but that some post offices offer similar services for banks across the board. Some post offices are open for a lot less than others. So there isn't equality of service through the post office in terms of hours of access. That's one thing that we looked at.
The other thing, Chair, just yourself coming from a rural constituency in areas that have no banks, towns and villages. Donaghadee, for example, now has no bank in it, and in Hollywood we're left with one, and we're worried that it will leave as well. So it is a growing trend, and we do recognise that banking has changed, but a lot of people still like access and need access to the bank, and they keep telling us they're in the mortgage world and that they're in the mortgage market, and that's part of their business. But if people can't, sit down and have a face-to-face interview with them.
Gordon, just picking up on that, because there's been a number of closures in my own constituency, my own area. Danske is just one of them. But I've never really heard how the post office transition works. In other words, are there many people who were previous customers availing of it? How is it working? How are, say, some of the more private issues around banking, how is that working in the more public forum of some of the post offices that I would know? It might be useful at some stage if we don't need to do it formally here, but we can arrange a meeting, if you like, off-site here on behalf of members of the committee with Danske, just to discuss a few of those matters, if members are happy enough to do that. Right, yeah?
Great, yeah.
I'm not just sure if it's the same read-across type of service. I don't know.
No, it's a good question. You can lodge money, I understand, obviously, into your account through the post office and withdraw money. I suppose that's about the limit of the service.
Just to hear what else it can do. So, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to probe a little bit more this issue of credit unions, and maybe Aidan or yourself can help us in that. I want to preface that by saying that one of the issues on this move away from branches is that leaving vacant premises. And in our discussions with Danske and the other banks, really need to encourage them to sell these properties on as quickly as possible. Not to be waiting for the highest bidder, but to get them back into use, because they're damaging all the other shops beside them by being empty and creating an atmosphere of dereliction. But the question about credit unions was, Newry was mentioned there. It offers a bank account, it's at a current account, and then you have some statements in the excellent document here that credit unions want more powers to do this. But are you telling me the powers are already there, that they can apply for them? Why is Newry the outlier on this?
I think that there was an issue in Newry, and there was ongoing stuff back and forward with the financial regulator around some of the stuff that Newry were maybe, they were doing it well, but they were maybe a wee bit more beyond the realm of ambition for what the regulatory powers would do. They moved into the field of mortgages, and the regulatory people were saying, hold on a wee minute here now. That process, as far as I know, is still ongoing.
So what is the process if the credit union wished to become a bank? Is it a devolved matter, I presume, and what is the process? How difficult is it?
Technically, are they a bank even?
Yeah.
Right. You mean for the range of facilities that they
Well, it
provide?
says here that Newry is the only credit union that offers a bank account. So what does that, I suppose, what does that mean? And can we get more of them to do that? Because these things, in my view, are, you know, what goes around comes around. Soon the credit unions may be replacing the banks.
Marching on that, we took a fair wee bit of evidence from the credit union people upon that. That's about maybe, what, a year or so ago. And it might be useful if we could get the record of the Hansard for you. Because with that went cost. And I think they were making a presentation that they would require to update some of their credit unions to that level, including ATMs and the likes, would require quite a considerable bit of investment. They were looking at from the executive over, in, I think in England and Wales, about 30 million had been set aside by the government to help upgrade credit unions to provide some of those facilities.
Thank you.
So, and the this pilot project, as far as I know, is part of, if you like, dipping the toe in the water around those. But I think it might be helpful if we could get the Hansard for you just to see what the credit unions were looking for and the attendant costs with that. So if we can agree to provide that to you, just.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, anyone else want to? No? Okay, Aidan, thanks very much indeed for your research, and I'm sure we'll be back to yourself and Daniel there, and our thanks to him as well for the work that he's done too. Okay, thanks indeed. Okay, now, right, so we agree then to meet with Danske around the post office Danske arrangement and how that works. And I think
Lack
that'll
of
be a useful
consultation,
start.
I think, Chairman.
Well, that'll be another thing.
Come into it.
Usually get a phone call first thing in the morning, by the way, as a statement coming, you know. So.
Sure, as part of that discussion with Danske, could you give us a little update on how many premises they have left and if they're now back in use or not, please?
Okay.
If that's possible.
And ask that agreed then?
Great.
All right. Next item then, we move on to matters arising. There are 4 items in the matters arising index on page 99 in your packs. Okay. So, agreed with the course of action there. 2 items, the DETI response there on the January monitoring round. That's the responses to the committee's request for further information. Now, are members content with that, or is there anything further they wish to seek clarity around? Agreed then to accept the response, okay? Agreed? Okay. And there's the Department for Employment Learning US Trade Mission response. Okay, noted. And tabled today is also the Department excuse me, of Education US Trade Mission response. And I don't know whether the members who are out on that trade mission have had a chance to look at that yet. Okay, read to note then. Thank you. Now, agenda item number 8. The written briefing from DETI, the updates on the report of the inquiry into renewable energy and strategic energy framework implementation plan. Included in the papers is a written briefing from DETI at page 118. Okay. So, all right. And members content to note unless there's...
We're going to look at more detail any time, Chairman, or?
I think probably whenever we see the regulator, we would need to look at all this sort of stuff.
Yeah. Have we got a request out to the regulator?
I know the regulator. I was speaking to her briefly about other stuff there yesterday, and she told me that she was preparing a response to some of our inquiry stuff, and that'll be with us very shortly. So maybe based on issues included in that,
right.
We may wish to see her anyway, and we could add other items to the agenda if need be at that point.
Good idea, thank you.
For that. Thank you. So, read then to note, agenda item number 9 is written briefing from DETI, the assessment on the importance to Northern Ireland of hosting the 2013 G8 Summit. There's an SIB assessment on the impact at page 128. Now, it seems to be that whenever you come to the local tourism providers, it's a bit of a curate's egg, this one. Goodman Parks, you know. Just looking at page 25, which is page 160 in your documents there, about the responses. 22% had actually said they lost occupancy as a result of the G8. This is the accommodation sector in Fermanagh. 15% of accommodation providers said they had gained occupancy, and 22% said they'd lost occupancy. So, and most of the accommodation providers didn't have to turn away business because of the G8. That's 76%. So, it seems to have sent the message across the world, but it doesn't seem to have arrived in a whole lot for the accommodation people. So, unless members have any questions around this, content to vote. Next item is the agenda item number 10, correspondence. There are 3 items of correspondence included in the papers. The index is at page 184. Okay. All right, and there's the BT response on customer access to the RTE player, which we have here. That's the RTE player, but we've also some detail there around the TG4 player, which a lot of people, including myself, are very interested in, but they're seeing exactly the same problem. Now, the man who wrote to me is the Deputy Director at TG Cahir, and he also, the background note here, the technical stuff was provided by one of his guys. Now, it seems to me fairly apparent there that what the issue is. I don't know where we take this, whether Ofcom can provide something to us, provide some sort of at least technical insights as to how this could be rectified, because I know it's been encountered as a problem by people. So, and further in this here, members be agreed then we follow through with Ofcom and see in what way it can be advanced. Agreed? Agreed. Okay. And then the other items there, unless otherwise are members content to note, the other 2 items of correspondence. Right? Agreed. Then tabled is correspondence from the Committee for the Environment regarding the collapse of a wind turbine at the Skrega wind farm in Tyrone. That's included in your table papers. Okay.
This is just a copy, Chair, of a letter the Environment Committee raised.
Number here.
13.
Here it is, it's page 12. So, discussed it, agreed to write to the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Investment regarding the health and safety aspects of it. So, they're copying us in, it's going through ourselves here just by way of correspondence. And hopefully we'll get the response to that as well. So, I presume they would as a matter of course, a matter of good practice. Okay?
Sorry, Chair, are they asking us as a committee to write to the chief?
No, the committee is writing to the department, and it's kind of is. They've enclosed a copy of the correspondence for it, just as good protocol would do. That kind of is that, the route that they have to go. So,
Chair, I have a question up on that today, whether we ever get to it or not.
In the. Oh, right.
To the Minister? Yeah, 2 o'clock.
Well, there's your supplementaries there, Gordon.
We'll take note, Chair.
So, okay. So, noted then.
I'll bring this with me, Chair, thanks.
Just in case.
Right. Okay, and then correspondence from the Department to the launch of the Matrix Life and Health Sciences Foresight Report. And if anyone wishes to attend that, then they contact the committee office. Okay? Great. Wasn't any other table documentation? I think maybe some came through my office late last night. There's nothing. No. Sorry, with regard to Heathrow Airport, I asked Shona to forward it up.
No, I didn't.
Oh well, if it's not there. They were told to have it with me early yesterday morning, and came in at about 6:30, 7:15 last night from them. So anyway, we needn't bother dealing with that. Next item is agenda item number 11, the forward work programme. And papers for this item include the committee's forward work programme up to the 24th of March, and that's at page 195. And just to inform members that our meeting on the 13th of January last week, the committee agreed to receive an oral briefing from Tourism Ireland. This has been now scheduled for our meeting on the 24th of February. So that done, if members are content with the forward work programme. Okay. And then any other business? I don't have any other business unless any member has. And that done, the date, time and place of next meeting. Next committee meeting will take place this day week at 10 o'clock, and if members would note change of location, it's in the Senate chamber. Okay, so thanks very much, everybody. And
We got there.
yes, we did indeed.
This is